Let's dive into my pushing build for Season 29 Fist of the Heavens Crusader. I'm currently ranked 6 on the overall leaderboards for the Crusader right now, and for the set specific leaderboards, I'm at number 4 and hoping to push all the way up to number 1. Despite its weaknesses, this is a pretty popular build this season because they brought back the automatic Fist of the Heavens that we had from Season 27. Let's start with the gear. Number 1, you're definitely going to want the Guardian set because we are Paragon capped this season. Unfortunately, the best one that I could get, albeit primal, does not have strength on it, so I had to go with vitality, crit chance, and Fist of the Heavens damage with that socket. This is very hard to roll. You're probably going to have to craft a lot of them to get a good one. Make sure it's got the crit, Fist of the Heavens, and the socket. You can be a little more lenient with the strength, the vitality, whatever else rolls there. This thing has a ton of possible rolls that are very inconvenient. For the shoulders, these are absolutely the stats you're going to want: strength, vitality, all resist, and cooldown. Now for the amulet, these are the correct stats. Unfortunately, I only have an 80% roll on my crit hit damage. However, you do not have to play with Squirt's Necklace if you don't want to. I know a lot of people do not like this item. If you don't want to play this, I would recommend going with the Compass Rose and Traveler's Pledge instead. And of course, we'll be using Bane of the Stricken in this because we absolutely struggle with single target damage, especially on Rift Guardians and beefy elites. For the chest, we want Aegis of Valor once again. Strength, vitality, this third slot is probably better off being resist all elements or reduce damage taken from elites. However, if you can get 15% life, that's pretty okay too. For the gloves, these are the stats you'll want: strength, crit, and cooldown. For the bracers, going with Guardians again, lightning damage, strength, vitality, and crit hit chance are going to be the stats you want. And for the belt, we're going to take the Vigilante belt. Unfortunately, this is not as good as the power that we had in Season 27, where we had the automatic Fist of the Heavens coming down, because this only works when you are on your mount. The other one was a little more forgiving during Season 27. When you were off your mount, for a few seconds, it would continue to cast Fist of the Heavens, so do bear in mind that you always have to be on your mount to get this to be going off. For the stats, strength, vitality, all resist would be better than armor, and cooldown reduction. For the ring slot, convention of elements, strength, crit, socket, and we're going to be using Bane of the Trapped when pushing. It is important to note that if you are not pushing and you're doing the speed variant, you would probably rather take Zay's Stone of Vengeance here and replace Bane of the Stricken with the Molten Wildebeest Gizzard. For the pants, once again, Aegis of Valor, strength, vitality, all resist would be better than armor. I'm really struggling to find pieces with all resist, but armor is sufficient for the time being. Now for the ring slot, I'm taking a Unity, crit, increased damage against elites, and a socket. No matter which jewelry you're going to be using, you're going to want to go with the Gogok of Swiftness. If you're playing the Compass Rose and Traveler's Pledge variants, you're going to drop the Unity and you would use the Compass Rose here, Traveler's Pledge here. It is worth noting that either which way you're going to want to go with the Convention of Elements as your alternative ring. Now for the weapon and the shield, we're going to be going with Norvald's Fervor. So we're going to want percent damage, strength, and cooldown reduction with a socket and an emerald in it. For the shield, strength, crit hit chance, cooldown reduction, and Fist of the Heavens damage. And lastly, for our feet, we're going to be going with Aegis of Valor, strength, vitality, all resist, and Fist of the Heavens damage. I will note that if you are doing a speed variant, you can drop the resist all elements and take movement speed, because in this season, we can go beyond the 25% cap that we get from the Paragon tree by adding it to our gear. To take a quick look at the cube, we're going to be using Dark Light, Casset's Cord of Righteousness, and Ring of Royal Grandeur. Regardless of whether or not you're playing the speed variant or the pushing variant, you're going to be wanting to go with these three options. Same thing goes with if you are using the Traveler's Pledge and Compass Rose. These are still going to be your picks for the cube. Moving along to the follower, I take the Templar. Mine is not quite perfect yet, but he's doing okay. For pushing, I have been able to pull off the relic to gain access to all skills as opposed to the one that says your follower cannot die. I would only recommend using this if you have a very geared follower and make sure that all of his items are augmented with intelligence. This is going to give him a ton of resist all elements. When pushing, you're going to want to take Leoric's Crown, and you're going to want to give a diamond in the socket. This is going to increase the cooldown reduction on the Templar by a large margin. The cooldown reduction is great for reducing the heal, and so he's going to be able to heal you more often. We are despite being a shield class, very squishy. Otherwise, just make sure that you have the essentials like the Flavor of Time to make pylons last twice as long, the Nemesis bracers, the Oculus ring, and of course if you are playing the Unity variant, make sure that your follower is carrying one as well. Last of all, just stack cooldown reduction as much as you can. If you are going with the relic to gain access to all skills, just make sure to get him as tanky as possible. Otherwise, if you're making sure that he can't die, just make sure that you're taking heal, loyalty, onslaught, and guardian would be my choices. Alrighty, to move on to the Paragon tree, we're going to take all of our points into movement speed. For offense, if you're pushing, you're going to want to put everything into cooldown reduction. If you're doing speed content, kind of like Torment 16, I actually do everything into attack speed. This really increases the rate that your Fist of the Heavens come down, and you can take out enemies just moving through them really fast. You never have to stop and wait for Fist of the Heavens to come out of the sky. This is kind of just nice for speed content. If you're doing something kind of beyond Torment 16, kind of like mid-speed content, say like GR 90 to 100, you may want to do about a 50-50 split in cooldown reduction and attack speed. For defense, I like doing a 50-50 split between resist all elements and life. This is going to vary a lot based on your gear. What is best for you may not be what is best for me, and so you might want to play around with the numbers a bit and check your toughness on your character sheet. And for the utility tree, I recommend going all in on area damage, especially if you're pushing. If you're doing speed content, you can kind of mess around with these other things like pickup radius and maybe even life per hit. Moving along to the skills, we're going to be taking Shield Glare with Divine Verdict. This is really nice for both defense and offense. It's going to add a 20% multiplier to your damage for 4 seconds, while also blinding the enemies. This is a fantastic skill for pushing. You're going to want to basically be using it all the time, blinding enemies in front of you to keep you safe. You can almost use the blinded enemies in front of you as a shield from everything behind it, because they're kind of just going to be wandering aimlessly. Alright, next up we're going to be taking Fist of the Heavens with Fissure. This is what the build is all about. I don't think we have to go too far into this. Next up, Iron Skin with Steel Skin. We're going to make it last 7 seconds instead of 3 by taking this rune. We're going to go with Steed Charge. I like to take Rejuvenation, but there's a lot of choices you can go with here. Rejuvenation's nice because with this build I'm constantly spamming my potion, I'm constantly taking damage. It's a bit of a squishy build, and this kind of helps you get a little bit of life back to go back into the action. Most people right now are taking Endurance just to increase the duration of the Steed Charge, which makes sense. However, with how much cooldown reduction we have, Steed Charge is going to be ready to go again the moment that it ends, regardless of whether you take Endurance or Rejuvenation. And a final option you can go with is Draw and Quarter, which is pretty nice because you can pull enemies into packs and kind of make them larger and larger. I haven't had much success with this, but it is an option. Laws of Hope. This is another one where you actually have quite a bit of choice. Most people are taking Wings of Angels to increase their movement speed and allow them to move freely through enemies. We can already do that when we're on our steed, so that's not much of a big deal. Really, all this is giving you is movement speed. Personally, I kind of like to take the Promise of Faith so that we're reducing non-physical damage that we take. Once again, very squishy build, and so it's nice to have anything that we can get to reduce how much damage we're taking. And lastly, we're going to be taking Akarat's Champion. This is up a pretty decent amount of the time with how much cooldown reduction we have. It's not permanent, but it is enough. You're going to be able to play a lot more greedy when you have this up, and when you don't, you're kind of going to have to play a bit more ranged and distant. For the passives, we're going to start with Heavenly Strength. We can wield a two-handed weapon. Our damage is reduced by 20%. This is fine because we need to use this to equip the Norvald set. Next up is Long Arm of the Law. Very good. It's going to make the active effect of all laws increase by 5 seconds, so we're going to be able to benefit from Laws of Hope for 5 additional seconds when we use that active ability. The next passive I like to take is Lord Commander, and this is especially because I'm using the Rejuvenation rune on the Steed Charge. If you're going with Endurance instead, and you get that 3-second duration, instead of Lord Commander, you could choose to go with Indestructible to gain an additional life. And last up, we're going to be taking Finery. This is a pretty standard choice in almost all Crusader builds to gain additional strength. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the playstyle. The speedrun playstyle and the pushing playstyle are actually quite a bit different for this build. When you're farming up all your gear and you're getting really used to just running through the middle of packs and killing everything all the time, it kind of gives you these bad habits that you don't want to be doing when you're pushing. I struggled to adapt to this a little bit, but you'll get used to it pretty quickly. So when pushing, once again, we're going to want to be taking Bane of the Trapped and Bane of the Stricken as opposed to the Molten Wildebeest Gizzard and the Zaystone of Vengeance. Now, the reason that we're kind of forced into playing this melee playstyle is we're going to want to go into those Oculus rings to gain additional damage, and of course, enemies are going to flock towards you. So in order to stay inside that circle, you kind of have to commit to that melee playstyle. Now, of course, this is a Convention of Elements build, and so we're going to have to play around that. We've got our Holy Cycle up right now. Next up is Lightning. This is where we do our big damage, and so prepare yourself for when that Lightning is coming up. When you see Holy, you're going to want to blind the enemies a few seconds into that Holy Cycle, and if you can get into an Oculus ring, that's perfect. Get on your horse and make sure that you're staying on your horse for that full 4 seconds and build up as many multipliers as you can by, of course, getting into the ring, blinding enemies, whatever you can do to gain additional damage when that cycle is up. One thing to really take note of with this build is when your defensive cooldowns are not active. You can't use an Iron Skin, you can't use your Laws of Hope, Akarat's Champion is not up. You really want to play a bit more defensive. You want to get out of that melee range. Of course, you're still going to be getting damage because your Fists of the Heavens are still going to be coming down, but you're going to want to play it safe because, again, very squishy build, and so play it safe when you don't have those defensive cooldowns up. Shield Glare is a super versatile skill. If your defensive cooldowns are down, this is a great defensive tool to use to blind the enemies in front of you and kind of block what's behind them. It is also a great offensive tool. This is absolutely one of the best skills on our bar, and so you're going to want to be using this as much as possible. Absolutely spam it, whether it's defensively, offensively, whatever, just make the best use of it that you can. One final note to take about the pushing variant of this build is elites are going to be really hard for you to kill as you're getting into these higher GR tiers, and so you're going to want to pull them into packs that have a lot of monsters in them. You're actually a really great trash killer, and so if you can pull the elites into there, you're going to benefit from the area damage of Fist of the Heavens, and the area damage does proc even on these automatic Fist of the Heavens. With us getting 200 points from the Paragon tree into area damage this season, that's absolutely huge, and so the way we're taking out elites is not by focusing on them or trying to 1v1 them. We need to pull them into packs, and sometimes you'll get even 3-4 elite packs kind of all coming towards you, and your best run is always going to be the one where you've got all these elite packs and then you hit a conduit. This build 100% requires a lot of fishing to get good clears. You're going to have to always be pulling these elites and hoping that you hit that conduit. This build does struggle when it comes to pushing if you don't hit that conduit, and so just be prepared to fish a lot. If you fail, it's okay. You're going to fail a lot as you're pushing up the leaderboards. Well guys, that just about sums up this build guide. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions for people playing this build, go ahead and drop a comment down below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.